What happens when Hollywood royalty meets Bravo royalty and everything goes completely wrong? In just 37 seconds, one comment turned a simple interview into the most explosive talk show moment of the year. This is the story of how Meghan Markle got kicked off Andy Cohen's show after a heated argument that nobody saw coming. The stage was set. The lights were bright. Andy Cohen sat in his signature chair at the clubhouse, ready to welcome his guest for what should have been a standard celebrity interview. Meghan Markle walked onto the set wearing a cream-colored designer dress, her smile polished and camera ready. The audience clapped. Andy stood up to greet her, extending his hand with his usual warmth. "Welcome to Watch What Happens Live," Andy said, his voice filled with that trademark enthusiasm that made him a household name. "We are so excited to have you here tonight." Meghan sat down, crossing her legs and adjusting herself in the seat. She looked around the clubhouse with an expression that seemed less than impressed. Andy noticed, but brushed it off, launching into his first question. "So, let's dive right in. You've been in the public eye for quite some time now. What's it been like navigating all the attention?" Meghan tilted her head slightly, pausing longer than necessary before responding. "Well, Andy, I think when you're at my level, you learn to handle these things with grace. Not everyone understands what it's like to have the world watching your every move." Andy nodded, keeping his composure. "Absolutely. I'm sure it's challenging. Speaking of challenges, you've taken on a lot of new projects lately. Can you tell us about what you're working on?" "I could," Meghan said, her tone sharp. "But I'm not sure your audience would really understand the depth of what I'm trying to accomplish. These are very sophisticated humanitarian efforts." The energy in the room shifted. Andy's smile tightened just a bit, but he pressed forward like the professional he was. "Well, why don't you try us? I think our viewers are pretty smart." Meghan let out a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Andy, I've done interviews with real journalists, people who ask meaningful questions, not just surface-level talk show banter." The audience went silent. You could hear the crew members shifting uncomfortably behind the cameras. Andy sat up straighter in his chair, his expression changing from friendly host to someone who wasn't going to let that slide. "I see," Andy said slowly. "Well, this is my show, and these are the questions I prepared. If they're not up to your standards, I'm happy to try a different approach." "It's not about standards," Meghan interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "It's about substance. When you've sat down with major networks, when you've done primetime specials, coming on a show like this feels a bit small." Andy's jaw clenched. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. This was live television, and things were spiraling fast. "Small," Andy repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Interesting choice of words. You know, I've been doing this show for over a decade. I've interviewed some of the biggest names in entertainment, politics, and culture. They all seem to find value in being here." Meghan shrugged, looking off to the side as if she was already bored. "Good for them. I'm just saying, I expected more when my team agreed to this booking." "Your team agreed because you wanted the publicity," Andy shot back, his voice calm but firm. "Let's not pretend otherwise. You're here because you have things to promote, just like everyone else who sits in that chair." "Excuse me?" Meghan's voice rose an octave. "I don't need publicity from you, Andy. I have plenty of my own platforms. I'm doing you a favor by being here." The audience gasped. Someone in the front row actually said, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Andy leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, looking directly at his guest. "A favor," he said, his tone ice cold now. "You think you're doing me a favor. That's fascinating, because from where I'm sitting, you walked onto my show, disrespected my questions, insulted my audience, and now you're acting like you're too good to be here." Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be spoken to like this. Do you know who I am?" Yes, I do, Andy said, standing up to match her energy. And clearly, you've forgotten who you're talking to. This is my house, my show, my rules. And you don't get to come in here and act like you're above everyone else. I'm leaving, Meghan announced, looking around for someone from her team. This is completely unprofessional. I've never been treated this way. Unprofessional? Andy laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about unprofessional? You've spent the last 10 minutes insulting me, my show, and my viewers. That's unprofessional. What I'm doing is standing up for myself and everyone who works hard to make this show happen every single night. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I'm done here. This was a mistake. You're right about one thing, Andy said, his voice cutting through the tension. This was a mistake, but not for the reasons you think. She turned back to face him, her eyes narrowed. And what's that supposed to mean? It means, Andy said clearly, that you came here thinking you could talk down to people and get away with it, that you could use this platform while simultaneously mocking it. But that's not how this works. You want respect? You have to give it. I don't need a lecture from you, Meghan snapped. You're just a talk show host who gossips about reality stars. Don't act like you're some kind of moral authority. The audience actually booed. Not a few people, but a substantial portion of the crowd. Andy held up his hand to quiet them down, though his expression showed he appreciated the support. You know what's interesting? Andy said, walking around his desk. Every other guest who sat in that chair, no matter how famous, has shown up with humility and grace. They understand that doing press means meeting people where they are. But you walked in here with an attitude from the start. Because I expected better, Meghan fired back. I expected intelligent conversation, not this circus. Then why did you come? Andy challenged. If this show is beneath you, if I'm beneath you, if my audience is beneath you, then why are you here? Because it seems to me like you wanted the exposure, but you're too proud to admit it. Meghan's face flushed red. I came here as a courtesy. My publicist suggested it. Clearly, that was poor judgment. Courtesy, Andy repeated with a bitter smile. Right. Well, let me extend you a courtesy right now. Since this show is so beneath you, since you find this all so offensive, you're welcome to leave. In fact, I'm asking you to leave. The room went completely silent. Even the audience stopped moving. Meghan stood there, seemingly shocked that someone was actually asking her to go. What did you just say? She asked quietly. I said you need to leave, Andy repeated, his voice firm and unwavering. This interview is over. I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me, my crew, or the people who watch the show. You want to leave? Great. The door is right there. Meghan looked around, as if waiting for someone to step in and save her. But nobody moved. The producers stayed quiet. The audience watched in stunned silence. Her own team members seemed frozen in place. You're kicking me off your show, Meghan said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. Do you have any idea what kind of backlash you're going to face for this? I'll take my chances, Andy said coolly. I'd rather face backlash for standing up for myself than let someone walk all over me on my own show. Now please, leave. This is outrageous, Meghan said, her voice getting louder. You invited me here, and now you're throwing me out like I'm nobody? No, Andy corrected. I'm asking you to leave because you've been rude, dismissive, and condescending from the moment you sat down. You're not being thrown out because you're nobody. You're being asked to leave because of how you've chosen to behave. Meghan grabbed her phone from her purse, her hands shaking slightly. My lawyers are going to hear about this. This is defamation. This is slander. Andy crossed his arms. It's actually neither of those things, but you're welcome to call whoever you want. In the meantime, security will show you out if you need help finding the exit. I know where the exit is, Meghan hissed. She turned on her heel and started walking toward the side of the stage, but then she stopped and turned back around. You know what your problem is, Andy? You're jealous. Jealous? That some people actually matter in this world while you just sit here and gossip. The audience booed again, louder this time. Andy held up his hand once more. My problem, Andy said, his voice rising for the first time. My problem is that I work hard every single day to create something that brings people joy. I show up. I put in the effort. I treat my guests with respect, even when they don't deserve it. But you know what I don't do? I don't pretend I'm better than everyone else. I don't look down on people. And I certainly don't insult people to their faces and then act shocked when there are consequences. Consequences, Meghan laughed harshly. What consequences? You think anyone is going to care about this? I think, Andy said, stepping closer, that people are going to see exactly who you are. They're going to see someone who can't handle a simple interview without making it about how superior she thinks she is. They're going to see someone who talks about grace and kindness, but doesn't practice it. Meghan's eyes went wide. How dare you? How dare I? Andy shot back. How dare you come into my space and act like this? You want to talk about dare? I dare you to watch this back and tell me you acted appropriately. I dare you to look at yourself and see what everyone else is seeing right now. And what's that? Meghan demanded. Someone who's forgotten that respect is earned, not demanded, Andy said simply. Someone who thinks a title or a status means you can treat people however you want. Someone who needs a reality check. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She stood there for a moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. I'm leaving, she finally said again. Good, Andy replied. Goodbye. Meghan walked toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. She pushed through the door without looking back, letting it slam behind her. The sound echoed through the studio. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Andy turned back to the camera, his expression tired but resolute. Well, he said to the audience and viewers at home, that just happened. I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I promise we'll have a much better energy in here. The audience erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering for him. Andy gave a small wave, acknowledging their support, but you could see the weight of what just happened on his face. During the commercial break, Andy sat back in his chair, running his hand through his hair. A producer came over to check on him, asking if he was okay. He nodded, taking a sip of water. The crew members all gave him supportive looks, some even patting him on the back as they passed by. When the cameras came back on, Andy had composed himself. His smile was back, though perhaps a bit more subdued than usual. Okay, he said to the camera, I'm not going to dwell on what just happened, but I do want to say one thing. This show has always been about fun, about celebration, about bringing people together, and I will always defend that spirit. I will always stand up for the people who make this show possible, and the people who watch it. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about ego. It's about connection. The audience applauded again, clearly moved by his words. Now, Andy continued, his energy picking back up, let's move on to something much more enjoyable. We have some amazing callers lined up, and I promise you, the rest of the show is going to be a blast. And it was. The energy shifted completely. The audience was more engaged than ever. The callers were entertaining, and Andy was back to his charming, quick-witted self. But everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. In the clubhouse that night, Andy Cohen had drawn a line. He had shown that no matter who you are, no matter what your status or background, respect is non-negotiable. He had stood his ground against someone who thought they could bulldoze through an interview with attitude and arrogance. The moment Meghan walked through that door, assuming she could treat the host, the crew, and the audience as beneath her, she sealed her fate. Every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture, every insulting remark built toward that inevitable conclusion. She had come onto someone else's show and tried to make it about her superiority. But Andy wasn't having it. In an industry where people often bend over backwards to accommodate celebrities, where hosts sometimes let guests get away with bad behavior just to avoid conflict, Andy made a different choice. He chose self-respect. He chose to honor his show, his team, and his audience. When Meghan asked if Andy knew who she was, she revealed everything. That question wasn't really a question. It was a statement. It was her way of saying that her identity should grant her immunity from criticism, that her position should mean she could say whatever she wanted without consequences. But Andy's response showed a different philosophy. Yes, he knew who she was, but that didn't matter. What mattered was how she was acting in that moment. What mattered was the respect she was or wasn't showing. The back and forth between them escalated not because Andy was being difficult, but because Meghan kept doubling down. Every time he tried to redirect, every time he attempted to salvage the interview, she pushed harder with her superiority complex. She couldn't help herself. She had to make sure everyone knew she thought she was better than this. And that's ultimately what led to her removal. Not because she had a different opinion, not because she challenged Andy, but because she showed fundamental disrespect for everyone involved in the production. From calling the question surface level to suggesting the audience wouldn't understand her work to directly insulting Andy's career, she systematically alienated everyone in that room. The audience's reaction told the whole story. They weren't just supporting Andy because he was the host. They were supporting him because they recognized what was happening. They saw someone being bullied in real time, someone being talked down to and disrespected, and they appreciated watching him stand up for himself. What made the moment even more powerful was Andy's composure. He didn't yell. He didn't lose control. He stated his position clearly and firmly. He explained exactly why her behavior was unacceptable. He gave her the opportunity to leave with some dignity, even after everything she had said. But Meghan couldn't resist one final jab. Her comment about jealousy, about mattering in the world, about Andy just sitting there gossiping, revealed how little she understood about what had just happened. She still thought this was about status. She still believed that her position made her right. When Meghan finally left, when that door slammed behind her, it marked the end of one of the most uncomfortable interviews in talk show history. But it also marked a moment of clarity. A moment where someone refused to be diminished. A moment where standing up for yourself meant more than keeping a celebrity happy. Andy's words after the break resonated because they were genuine. This show has always been about fun, about celebration, about bringing people together. And when someone threatens that spirit, when someone tries to poison that atmosphere with arrogance and disdain, something has to give. Throughout the confrontation, Meghan kept returning to the same themes. She was too important for this. She was doing everyone a favor. She deserved better treatment. But each time she made these arguments, she only proved Andy's point more clearly. She was so focused on her own perceived status that she couldn't see how badly she was behaving. Andy's comment about it being neither defamation nor slander was perfect. It was factual, it was calm, and it completely deflated her attempt at intimidation. He wasn't scared of her threats because he hadn't done anything wrong. He had simply refused to be disrespected. Meghan's insistence that she knew where the exit was came across as childish, like a teenager storming out of a room after being told off. It was her attempt to maintain some control over the situation, to make it seem like she was leaving on her own terms, rather than being asked to go. But everyone watching knew the truth. She was being kicked off the show. Andy had made that abundantly clear. Her performance of independence fooled no one. Andy's challenge for her to watch it back was brilliant. It put the ball entirely in her court. If she truly believed she had behaved appropriately, then watching the footage should vindicate her. But if she had any self-awareness at all, seeing herself would be uncomfortable at best. His point about respect being earned rather than demanded cut to the heart of the issue. Meghan walked in expecting deference based solely on who she was. She didn't think she needed to earn anyone's respect through her actions or behavior. She thought it should be automatically granted. But respect doesn't work that way. Yes, you can have an initial baseline of respect for any human being, but maintaining and deepening that respect requires reciprocity. It requires treating others the way you want to be treated. Meghan failed that basic test. Andy's simple good and goodbye were the perfect send-off. No long speech, no additional commentary, just a clear, final dismissal. He had said everything that needed to be said. There was nothing left to discuss. The door slam was the exclamation point on the entire encounter. It was dramatic. It was loud, and it was fitting. Meghan had approached the entire interview with dramatic flair and attitude. The slam was her final performance, whether she intended it that way or not. Andy's first words after she left, that simple, well, that just happened, showed his humanity. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't celebrating. He was acknowledging that something difficult and awkward had just occurred. He was being real about it. The standing ovation from the audience was spontaneous and heartfelt. They weren't applauding because they enjoyed conflict. They were applauding because they respected someone standing up for themselves. They were applauding courage and integrity. When Andy came back from commercial, his words about the show being about fun, celebration, and connection weren't empty platitudes. They were a mission statement. They were a reminder of why the show existed and what it stood for. And they were a contrast to everything Meghan had brought to the table. The comment about it not being about ego was particularly powerful, given that ego was precisely what had driven Meghan's behavior. She had made the entire interview about her ego, her status, her perceived importance. The fact that the rest of the show was genuinely enjoyable proved Andy's point. You didn't need a big-name celebrity acting superior to make good television. That night in the clubhouse became a defining moment. It was a line being drawn about acceptable behavior. The contrast between someone who thought they could bulldoze through an interview and someone who understood the value of mutual respect couldn't have been clearer. Every condescending comment from Meghan had been a choice. Every dismissive gesture had been intentional. She was showing who she was when she thought she had all the power. The back and forth wasn't about two equal parties having a disagreement. It was about someone asserting their humanity and dignity in the face of someone else trying to diminish them. It was about refusing to play a role that had been assigned without consent. Andy's patience before finally asking her to leave showed restraint. He tried multiple times to redirect. He gave her chances to adjust. He was professional even when she wasn't. But there's only so much anyone should be expected to tolerate. The moment he asked her to leave wasn't impulsive. It was necessary. It was the logical conclusion of everything that had built up to that point. She had shown no willingness to change her behavior. She had doubled down at every opportunity. Something had to give. Her shock at being asked to leave revealed how insulated she had become. She genuinely didn't expect consequences for her actions. She thought her status made her immune. Learning otherwise in such a public way must have been jarring. The threats about lawyers and legal action were a last-ditch effort to regain control through intimidation. But they backfired. They made her look desperate and vindictive. They underscored Andy's point about her behavior being the problem. When she finally walked out, when that door slammed, it marked the end of her time in that space. But it also marked the beginning of everyone processing what had happened. The audience, the crew, the viewers at home, all trying to make sense of this unprecedented moment. The standing ovation wasn't just about supporting Andy. It was about rejecting what Meghan represented. It was about saying that arrogance and entitlement aren't acceptable. It was about celebrating the courage it took to draw that line. Andy's exhaustion after the commercial break was understandable. Standing up to someone like that takes energy. Maintaining composure while being insulted takes effort. He had just been through an emotionally taxing experience. But his ability to bounce back, to reset the energy, to deliver a great rest of the show proved his professionalism. He didn't let one bad experience ruin everything else. He didn't let Meghan's negativity poison the entire evening. The words he chose after coming back were carefully considered. He acknowledged what happened without dwelling on it. He stated his values without being preachy. He moved forward without pretending nothing had occurred.